Folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Appreciate you all being here tonight. First item on tonight's work session agenda will be discussion of small cell towers. Mr. Wayne Dice.
Thank you, Council President. I think Jeff's going to join us as well. Just want to make y'all, as we said at the last meeting, make y'all aware of application we think we're going to be having coming soon, and it's a new technology. And I think Jeff had some slides he wanted to show you as well, so you know what we're talking about. But the cell phone providers are going to just more of a small cell type tower to increase, I guess, their data speed and those kind of things. And Jeff had some pictures of which I think he's coming. Okay. And so what we anticipate is them coming before the Planning Commission under a utility review, which is pretty typical, to place these along primarily Greeno Road, and they're fairly close together. I think probably line of sight, and so just want to give you a heads up about that. We're looking at trying to tailor maybe some regulations. We're concerned about the aesthetics of it and the number of those, and potentially trying to find ways to co-locate them on other structures. Jeff, anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, what they're looking right now is currently to expand their 4G coverage. So this is what they're looking at doing, this type of structure, putting up their own pole, running fiber to the pole, and having a small cell on top. Let's see, kind of another view of it. You're going to have some equipment towards the bottom of the pole with the antenna on the top. And from what I've read, a lot of cities are struggling right now because there's no, I guess, regulation or design structure for these, so they just put up whatever they want to put up.
And each company has their own design. So if AT&T comes in, then
right.
next will be and all of them will have their own individual towers.
And that's also a concern is the proliferation. Each one having their own towers, and these are between 20 and 30 feet, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and within close proximity to one another to make them work correctly.
Can you give an estimate of the proximity?
Well, initially with the 4G, I mean, they had, he said they had a range of about 300 to 500 feet. As technology progresses, we get into the 5G. The wavelengths are smaller, so that that distance will shrink over time. So they'll need more and more. Let's see. I think I had another picture. This is what cities are struggling with. They got poles where you got all three cell phone companies are just stacking them all on one pole, and it these are all over town. So what do we? I guess we're hoping to do is just before they get started, going all over the city with these, is come up with some kind of way to manage this. They offer there's plenty of companies out there that'll offer streetlight poles with this integrated. So I don't know if we can work with the cell phone companies to do something like that to where they're not even visible. They're just integrated with current infrastructure like streetlight poles.
And some of them we're going to be replacing.
So why do they have to use this? I mean, we have those carriers already have 4G with the existing antennas. And does that mean are they going to be phasing those out? And I know that some people would argue that there's not full coverage, but with maybe one more antenna in certain places, you could get full coverage. So
right.
Why are they moving away from that current technology if it's still 4G?
They're not moving away from it. They're just supplementing it. So if you notice, we do have some Verizon small cells that were put up probably 6-7 years ago.
2013.
So what they did is they had a huge coverage gap along Mobile Street, and so they put them up there to boost that coverage. So this is what AT&T was wanting to do. They did a propagation study of their antennas on our water tanks, and the gaps that they have, they're just filling the gaps with these small cells. So that's what they're trying to achieve.
They gave us a map of where they anticipated putting them. I just think that what we would like to do as a city is get ahead of this and planning and, make sure that whatever's put in place is something that comes from us.
And-
It's our plan.
Right, and so I think we have one coming soon. One of the things we were going to discuss with the council is a potential limited moratorium until we can get some design standards in place, and try to find the best practices from around the country to how to handle these so they are sightly and aren't an eyesore around the community. Now, a lot of these are also on Greeno, which is also a state right of way, so there's some things we need to work through with that. But I think, what we would likely prefer is maybe a limited moratorium and let us have a chance to consult with some other cities that have dealt with these and have come up with some regulations that will help that. We do know, and it is an emerging technology, so you have to, at some level, embrace it, but also we can do it in a way that's tactful and does not create an eyesore for Fairhope.
Did you not say that this is going to be required for 5G? Did I hear that?
Absolutely.
So really what they're really doing is
Is getting rid of
transitioning to
5G. That was
5G.
what I was
Don't
about to
let
ask.
them blow smoke and say
Oh, no,
that
they
they're
said
trying to
that.
fill gaps. They're trying to promote 5G.
Well,
Yeah.
That's what they said.
Yeah,
That's not what I just heard. I
Oh,
heard they're
okay.
filling
And I think
gaps
it's
with
filled,
4G.
before they were filling in gaps.
And this is their way
What we
to
have now.
prep
to get in the
5G.
door, basically.
Yeah, but the concerns are twofold. One is the eyesore, and then the secondly is the proliferation from different companies on the same streets and so forth. That's the concern.
Do they plan on renting these, if they use a utility pole, do they plan on paying rent?
Well, and I think with the
Are they
utility,
gonna have private landowners, we're gonna let them rent space to them? I mean, a lot of questions.
yeah, I think with the utility poles, I think the utility department is concerned about putting these on an active utility pole just because of the maintenance and maintaining
We would have to
those.
maintain it. We would have to
Right.
put up the equipment and take down the equipment if it's on a power pole. So that's why they're leaning more towards the standalone pole.
If you don't allow them to do that, then you have, what, double the utility poles,
Mhm.
That's-
Triple.
That's,
triple?
Yeah,
well, at least, because we've got at least 3 cell companies that would want
yeah,
to do
3
it.
carriers.
And from what I've read, I mean, 5G is not set in stone yet, but once 5G is completely rolled out, they're expecting these small cells to be pretty much the equivalent to about every 10 power poles. Every 10 will have a small cell on it in order for this to work properly.
Is the 5G based upon having the small cells?
There will
So
be-
they won't have 5G, so the consumer is gonna demand, ultimately 5G, they'll
And
have to have 5G to have any service, and then the customers will demand that we allow them to put it up, or they can't have cell phone service.
Exactly.
If they all go to that standard.
And small cells right now, it seems the way that it's going to be achieved. I mean, you can expect it. I mean, not only to be on the public right, public streets, but also like in neighborhoods as well, to be able to cover the neighborhoods.
And they're not doing this immediately in all cities, but they're doing, Fairhope is one of a select few.
Right, we have been, AT&T has asked us about this, and they have not made an application yet because they have to go through the utility review process for the planning commission, but we anticipate them doing this shortly, and that's why we are concerned about the aesthetics and the proliferation, and would like some time to help kind of craft some regulations we think may be able to mitigate any kind of issues such as the eyesore and proliferation.
How soon are they, go ahead. How soon are they wanting to have this rolled out, and how quickly could you have some proposed ordinances or stuff in place?
We don't have an application yet. Tomorrow's the deadline. I don't anticipate getting one from them tomorrow, which would push it to the January Planning Commission meeting. So my guess is sometime in the spring is what I would anticipate them getting to the Planning Commission. As far as the time to craft some regulations, it's just a matter of, we've already met a couple of times about this and talking about it internally with staff. I think what we'd be looking for is the best practices from some other areas around the country and how they've dealt with that, and try to incorporate those here. So I wouldn't think it'd be too long of a process to do that. Jeff, do you have any other?
Are there any towns close by that already have that?
I know Gulf Shores, they've installed a couple of small cells, but I think they're utilizing condos over there
Mhm.
for their sites.
We do have a few, again, as Jeff said, on Mobile Street, that were installed in 2013 because of just a hole they had there, but nothing to the scale, I think, that what we anticipate coming.
But they don't have a town that they've done this in.
Oh yeah,
We'll be
we
the
do.
first one.
No. Yeah. It's been done in other areas throughout the United States. I'm not familiar with a town near us that has gone. This.
Not near
Well, like
us.
you said, the Verizon has some of the small towers
Mhm.
along Scenic.
Mm-hmm.
I think back
Right.
to what Jack said, I mean, once they roll out 5G, it's here, and everybody who's on 3G or 4G quality phone is not gonna be able to keep up, and that's what happened
Right.
when they rolled out 4G.
Just think that, since we're a town, we own our electricity, this is where we can put something, a plan of some sort into place where they're using based on what we want it to look like. And I know they said that not to put, this infrastructure on our poles, but, somebody told us that in utilities that we could just increase the pole, height and include it that way, but I can't remember, you said, I
Right.
thought they could maintain it, but we had to give them permission.
I think once it's above, Richard may have to correct me on this, but I think it's once it's above our service that we would be the ones that would have to put it up and take it down.
But also you have other infrastructure that would go near the bottom of the pole too. So it's not,
Right. So-
Jeff had a couple examples where they incorporated it all into one pole, a rather large pole, but it looked better than.
Yeah,
I
it's
wouldn't,
just one-
I wouldn't rule it out as opposed to increasing the number of holes in the city by 200 or 300%.
Mm-hmm. But like these pictures here, I think these, Jeff, they're incorporated in the pole itself.
Right, it's all inside the pole, and realize too that these are not mesh systems where they don't use radio frequencies off of each other. There's fiber ran to each one of them, so that's digging up the right of way to get fiber ran to each
And we have
individual.
to give them permission to do that, to use our right of way. That's where our utility easements come into play.
Unless it's the state right of way. I think state DOT would do that at that point.
Other than
Right.
the
Yeah,
state.
yes, sir, that's right.
A light pole would be able to house more than one provider?
Yes, I think they're going to try to design them to where all three of them can utilize one pole. See, that's the problem with 5G. It's not standardized. It's not set in stone yet, so it's still kind of.
But putting a plan together, would allow us to, as we're upgrading our utilities, to lay it, if we lay fiber, or at least conduit for it, so it's all done when we're doing our upgrades, and there's not a lot of digging having to happen afterwards.
Now, I'm kind of a simple guy.
Mm-hmm.
That pole I'm looking at right there would qualify for what they need. If they don't want to use that pole, or that pole.
Well,
we
I
can
just.
mark it. I mean, to me,
Well,
that would serve several purposes.
right.
As far
I'm
as
just saying
getting
that's-
light to the communities and to the
Right.
area.
Yeah, I'm saying that could be an option, but I think they want to go, of course they want to go their route and
Yeah.
put it up as quick as possible. We'll just by throwing a wood pole up and throwing a tin on top. So,
Well,
Which-
I understand that's what they want to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to do.
If we lay conduit down and if we're, working on our sewer lines, water lines, gas lines, whatever it is, and we're putting conduit down for them, how do you go back, and also just something to think about, I don't expect you to answer this now, but how would they reimburse us for the cost of that?
Right.
As well, because, if they were to come in later and put it in, they have to have a cost, so they
Right.
have to purchase that, from
Yeah,
us.
there would be a cost until it's limited to us by a federal law, which they're trying to do too, limit that amount that municipalities can earn.
Jay, do you have an interest in a moratorium on this?
Well, until we figure out a plan, because like Wayne and Jeffco said, it's coming. And if it's not planned out and figured out the right way, it's not gonna look like we always want it to look like.
That's what we'll end up with, I'm afraid.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So, get us
Okay.
something pretty quick.
Okay.
Which brings me, I have two more items along these lines, and I was contacted by somebody today, and I was contacted by a citizen 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I don't know if this is factual, but somebody had said that Mediacom had some kind of exclusive agreement with the city of Fairhope in certain areas, that they were supposed to maintain an office here for exclusive rights to provide internet services in certain parts of town. And I said, I don't know of any ISP that we've ever denied the right to run to any neighborhood, whomever they are. And I said, unless I saw that contract, I'm not sure of any exclusivity in any agreement that was made that they must maintain an office here. So do y'all know, Mayor, Lisa, do you know of anything? Does that even ring a bell? It didn't, it's just, I don't want that rumor circulating around town. I'd like to be able to say there's no exclusivity given to any of these providers.
Keep it
Yeah,
competitive.
I'm certainly not familiar with anything like that.
Can I ask y'all just to maybe look into that, see if, make sure that, so I can tell these people this, you know, and put this rumor to bed?
Right.
Because they're saying that they can't get AT&T because MediaCom had exclusive rights, and I said that. And that's what I said. I balked at that, but before I say it concretely, I thought we should maybe do a quick search because there's a lot of agreements. Okay, and then the next thing along these lines, since we're talking about moratoriums, I really should have had it on the work session tonight, is we've talked about a moratorium for rezoning along the Greeno Road corridor. And Wayne has given me a draft, and I don't know, did you send that to everybody, Wayne?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay.
I sent it to you.
You sent it to me, okay. I should have already sent it to you, Councilmember, so I apologize for that. I let that slip through the cracks, but since we're here, I want to kind of, can you hit the highlights of that?
Yes, sir, I can. You know, it's based off the visual preference survey. It closes on the 30th. We're going to stop taking the online survey on the 30th. I think we have about 800 people who have taken that visual preference survey. We hope to get the results back from the consultant and then work to prepare a draft amendment for the council to look at. And in the meantime,
I just sent it to everybody.
we would like to have some time to work on that. And so I think what the moratorium said on rezoning, site plans, MOPs, and basically other projects, and which would give us time to craft some language that will help address the concerns raised by the visual preference survey on Greeno Road to make sure that we are the buildings look the way we want them to look, the land uses are what we want to have on Greeno Road. And so what we had suggested is a temporary moratorium to allow us time to also to prepare some amendments for that. And so basically it would apply to rezoning, site plan approvals, MOPs. And I had it limited to that, but the more I think about it, there are a few cases where you could have a project that does not trigger the site plan review, which would just be an administrative review by staff. The site plan review is triggered by a couple of things, and if the site plan review is triggered, it goes to the Planning Commission, City Council. But there may be a rare occurrence where you could have a project that does not get triggered by that, and so if we want to be comprehensive in our approach to the moratorium, we may want to just mention that as well. And so I'd be glad to go back and put something in there if that's what you guys desire. But the way it's written now, again, it's rezoning, site plan approvals, and MOPs.
Comments, council?
So timeframe, so is that 270 days?
We were going to do a time frame around the visual preference survey too.
Right. Did I put 270 days?
That's what I'm
yeah.
reading here.
Okay.
And again, it would be that or until we adopt some regulations. I mean, it would expire on that day, but if we adopted it earlier, it would automatically expire once we adopted some regulations for that. So we've already, just been gathering some information that I think would be appropriate. We'll wait and see what the visual preference survey says, but there are some things that I think that are pretty obvious of things we don't want to see on Greeno Road, which I've already kind of compiled a list of things. But we would like the opportunity to have a chance to work on that and bring something back to y'all. It's very difficult sometimes when you're trying to craft regulations while things are still going on at the same time.
I feel like you ought to probably take that more comprehensive approach.
Okay.
As mentioned, you don't want something to slide through while you're not, if it doesn't trigger
Right.
some of those other items. Is it possible to do it? Is it realistic to do it faster than 270 days?
It probably is. I just trying to be a little bit more on the conservative
We can
side.
always go back and end it.
Right.
It ain't-
Right.
if
That's
at
right.
any time,
Right.
We're ready.
Now, for projects that have PUD approval, I don't think they would apply there. We have some projects that have PUD approval. I think they have gained a right to move forward with those. So it would not apply to some of these projects that have already gotten approval. But it would apply to the application of any new applications that may be seeking approval.
Any rezoning.
That's right.
Would y'all like to see that on the next agenda?
Okay.
Okay. You want to make those edits that?
Yes, sir.
Councilman
I will.
Conyers, I think so, and
Yeah.
Send a reminder.
send that to
What you
everybody
sent me.
Perfect.
to review so that you can ask Wayne questions prior to next meeting.
Okay.
And we'll introduce it.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Peterson, I hope that Mr. Johnson gave you a heads up that I called him because he was his
Richard's
name.
welcome to add his.
So really, Richard, there's a rather large expenditure on tonight's agenda, a little over $250,000 for the electrical repairs at the main pier. And that is item 14. And I think you gave us some information, but to me, it looked like a lot of code language. It was, how things were going to be constructed and not so much the scope of what we're paying for. And as I guess to make it this real easy, one of the questions I had was, is most of this covered by grant money, by disaster funds?
Yeah, FEMA will reimburse 87.5% of the project.
That makes things a lot easier to swallow on that. But I couldn't remember exactly what that number is. I know you've told us that probably 3 times.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I've done that, but, the issue that came up after Nate, which is this a Hurricane Nate issue, and the electrical was pretty much destroyed in the marina part of it. And then as we started looking to use our own forces to replace the things that were broken or falling off, and Eric can help us with this too, we realized that some of the circuits that were going to each of these individual circuits and sub-panels at the marina were undersized. And so then we started backing up to the transformer that was feeding all of that in the closet, and it was undersized based on new current code requirements for size and the feeders to each of these different devices that we had out there for boats to hook up to. And it just got to be a snowball that got way bigger than what we were prepared to deal with internally. And then, of course, we had other things going on too, but at that time we got Stewart Electric or Stewart Engineering to come in and look at it for us. And they created the plans that we received bids from. And, we were a little, had sticker shock with the price of it, initially, but.
There's about 27 slips there roughly. And if you had, that's $10,000 per slip in the electrical work, if that was the only thing that was done. I understand there's a transformer and some other things.
Well, we're replacing the
feeders
feeders to Shuck's Restaurant, which is probably not the big part of that work at all. But I mean, we're upgrading the service to the house panel, that's there for the lights, and replacing some of the lights that have problems now, or not replacing the lights, but the circuits to those lights.
Did anybody else get sticker shock from that number? $250,000 for the electrical work? I mean, that wouldn't be recovered in 6 lifetimes on, rents from those slips. I guess I'm glad we're getting grant money, but does that, maybe we'd hear from the new electric superintendent. I don't know if he's looked at that, but that seems, I don't know. It just seems extraordinarily high.
Our portion would be.
35,000.
Yeah, 35,000.
But still.
But still, but if we get the contractors that's spending $270-something thousand to put wiring it, it's not that complicated.
Well, one guy about $90,000 below, and he apparently withdrew, decided that was.
Oh, yeah,
probably
that,
not a
I'm
good
glad you
bid.
brought that up.
Yeah.
Why was,
Right.
is
And
that why we didn't
he
choose
didn't
the
have the
low bidder?
longshoreman insurance. He didn't have the longshoreman insurance requirement in his bid.
Yeah, his workers' comp company couldn't confirm that he had the proper workers' comp policies to be working above the water. So he had to withdraw his bid.
Have you looked at the specifications on this?
I have a little bit.
Okay.
I came into it very late, but the way that it's designed from Stewart Engineering is very rigid. I'm not going to say the next storm isn't going to take it out, but the way they're designing it and putting it together, the materials they're using are all marine grade. There was an addendum to the contract to make sure that that's going to happen. The new transformer, we're going to order that, get it here.
What's a transformer like that cost?
I'm not sure, I haven't gone out for bids
I
yet.
don't think it was that bad. I think it was under $5,000. And that'll be the dry types. Have you been in the electric closet, any of you, for what they serve? I mean, right now, it's like what would be a pod or a pole-mounted transformer that's kind of shielded from access. And, you know, I mean, there's some pretty high voltage wires that are sitting there, and so the dry type transformer, the pad mount transformer we're going to put in there will eliminate some of that safety concern that would come with how it's set up now.
And I see all that, getting that power out there, but once you get it there and you take it to the, is every slip gonna have power? I mean,
Yes.
because then you gotta have a pedestal. Does this include the
Yes.
pedestal for
Yeah, the
everyone?
pedestals
Everything's
we
rebuilt,
have
all the
those.
So
electrics
the
are-
pedestals that we bought for our
Those are the
Marina
ones will
were
be used.
$1,000 a piece roughly.
Oh,
$900.
no, maybe not.
I don't remember
Lynn, how much were
being
the
that high.
pedestals we're putting at the Fairhope docks? Like $900? $900 a piece. So there's another, you know, on average, again, it's $10,000 a
And
slip.
another big expense is dredging that marina, and that's something we're gonna have to do, and hopefully we're gonna piggyback that, I guess, license, Richard Johnson to do the marina at the pier as well. Yes, and so that's something that, according to the lease, you know, that person has to pay for half of it. And I have already spoken, you know, with Rick, and he's not gonna wanna do that. So I'd like for us to look at possibly the future use of that marina, and maybe looking at it after we dredge for more, you know, people coming in for the day, eating at the restaurant, going downtown if they want, but maybe not as a long-term rental. I mean, figure out a better use for economically. And it might not be renting anymore. It might just be having a place where people can dock and
Yeah, well,
come
if we're-
visit for the day.
If we're doing that, then why are we putting $250,000 into electrical
That's
service
what
at
we
every
can,
slip?
look at that now. That's why I want to throw it in there, just to see what the future use should look like.
I mean, I get it. I mean, we're getting it for 12.5 cents on the dollar, and that's a heck of a deal. You don't want to turn it down, but at the
Right.
same time, do you want a docking station at every single slip? When I'm hearing everything from it'll be nothing but transient boats. You maybe only need 10 docking stations there, or, you know, not
Or-
everybody that pulls
or
up is
expand
gonna
it.
plug their boat in.
I mean, I think that you can look at this with, you know, the restore money that we're getting as well, and just looking at it, if you started from scratch, what would be a better use for this marina? And opening it up to dredging, you could have a place for, you know, I'm just
I mean,
talking.
didn't Nate deposit about 3 foot of sand in there?
Probably. You know, but, you know, we're gonna hopefully start maintaining that more.
I mean, I think that, you know, if we had Nate money to dredge it, it would pay more dividends than $250,000 in electrical upgrades. It may never be fully utilized.
well,
It'll be
and-
I
utilized,
wonder
but
when
maybe
the
not.
deadline
Even
for
with
that.
transient boats staying for a day, you know, if they have the air conditioning, they're gonna probably wanna hook up to power.
Well, that's no doubt about it, but are we gonna allow transient boats to spend a night on our pier without, I mean, we're gonna start charging a transient rate? Now you're talking about a big discussion.
Right.
So I guess, I think your input, Mayor, is valuable as to, you know, what we're doing. Are we saying that we don't have to approve this tonight? Is that what I mean?
No, I think we need to improve it, and I think this investment of upgrading it to a certain standard is a great
It
opportunity.
leaves all your options open,
Okay.
if nothing else.
It's a good price. But
It was eye-opening when the bids were opened.
I also worry about, you know, even though we're paying 12.5 cents on the dollar, you know, in the future, we may be paying 20 cents or 50 cents on the dollar.
Oh, I
and
agree.
Do we continue to accept bids? I mean, we know we had a bid that was $80,000 less, $86,000 less it was, but they didn't have their proper insurance.
A couple of things real quick. Let you know, FEMA didn't do us any favors with the new flood maps. I believe they raised our base flood out there about a foot, so a lot of the additional cost is not only the enclosure types, but we've got a lot of stuff below base flood there, and we have to protect it. Now, a marina is a functionally dependent facility, so they're allowed to be below base flood for the power feeds at the dock. But we have to try to protect the panels and the transformers coming in, so I don't know if we've got waterproof or watertight equipment that's been spec'd in this. That's part of it. But the other thing you need to keep in mind is our contract right now with the leaseholder out at the pier says that those marinas go with that. And right now, we are not providing them with power.
Was in that contract, does it state every slip is supposed to have power?
I don't know how that reads. I know that
I don't know that they all had power ever.
Yeah. That's one of the things that comes up, when I go out and we deal with the restaurant on issues or talk to them about life safety inspections and things of that nature. They need power because that's part of their lease, is they are able to lease out those spaces in that marina, and it's the city's responsibility to provide them with power. That's part of what they lost with the damage from the hurricane, is we are not providing them at least reliable and certainly not widespread power at the marina, and I believe that's part of our contract. So we need to look at it from that. Unless you want to try to renegotiate that contract, that's something that's brought up every time I go out and I speak to Josh or I speak to the folks
Right, and
out
that's-
there.
That's what I've done too. It's
Well, I'm
just,
familiar with that. I just don't know that every slip there had, 50 amp service.
Well, the issue, I think right now, though,
I don't think every slip there ever had 30 or 50 amp power.
At the center dock, there was supposed to be, or there was 250 amp services on each side of it. The rest of them were 30 amp.
yeah, I think
All of them
we,
had 30 amp?
Standard, if you go to Boats US, when they provide shore power for a boat, the standard is 30 amp.
Did they all have 30 amp?
They're all 30
Yeah.
amp.
Minimum? Okay.
there were pedestals, it looks like, at all
Okay.
those slips. And
Okay.
so I just want to make sure that you kind of,
That helps.
32
yeah.
slips.
32, okay, yeah.
but
Yeah.
again, we do also have to think about dredging. It absolutely has to be dredged, and part of the contract too is that that investment is split. And we know that
Right.
they don't want to do that. So I just think it's an opportunity just to further the conversation with them. I think that having a more transient location would increase their business. So,
I don't want to get in the habit of awarding
no, but it's
exorbitant
economic.
contracts.
I think
Given that message that we'll
visiting
just accept
Fairhope
any
is
bid. Just throw a
a
number
big
out,
one.
we'll accept it.
Yeah. Where the lease is concerned between the city and Shucks, it doesn't address that every slip must have an electrical outlet itself. That would be something between Shucks and the marina. That's their
Well, I
job.
think
But
what
we're
Mr.
not
Pope said Very
required.
valuable, though. If every one of them had a minimum of 30 amp service, then that's
30 amp is just a standard. The state code calls for a minimum of 20 amps.
right.
But
Nobody uses that.
The 20 amp twist lock.
No, I'm familiar with the marinas and what they have, the 30, typically a 30 and a 50 on the same tower.
The bigger boats that have full air conditioning stuff, yacht type boats, most of them will have 50 amp.
I mean, we're providing at the marina, we'll be providing, pedestals shared by two slips.
Right.
That's not
Is that what we're
unusual.
going to do there? Okay,
Yeah, there'll be one pedestal and that'll come off on both sides.
okay, all right.
I'll also take a little bit of the responsibility for the price of the bid, because one of the things that I pushed for very hard was we needed a registered electrical or a licensed electrical engineer to do the layout, and then we need to hire a licensed bonded electrical contractor to do the work, instead of us trying to do it with electric department staff that are really not experienced when it comes to marina work. There's a tremendous amount of liability when you've got water and power right there. And from a legal standpoint and a liability standpoint, I pushed very hard for us to bid this outside and hire someone who has done this before and knows what they're doing on that end for protection of the city. Because if we were to do the work and something were to go wrong, then that is just an incredible amount of liability on the city. And I've
Thank
done
you
the
for
same
that.
thing out at the
That's
Fairhope
very-
docks.
Very good.
I would just say that, I think we've got a chance to do it for 12.5 cents on the dollar, even though it is a large bid. My only question would be, what is the risk that we don't get it reimbursed if we're gonna take on a bid that large? Is there any risk really that we're not gonna get
We get
reimbursed?
reimbursed for that.
I'm not seeing that there's a risk to it, man, I don't know how FEMA operates as well as maybe John Saraceno or even Richard may know, but it seems pretty secure to me. Every communication we've had with them, they've been on board with what we've been doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Okay, that's item 14 on tonight's agenda, council. Item 3, discussion of remaining budget for 2018-2019. So we're down to the general fund, and I just had some lingering questions on this. It's not politics, nothing to be gained by delaying the passage of the budget. My questions are this, and this is, I'll blame myself, I just haven't had quite enough time to come to grip with it, is that we're taking 1% of the sales tax, or 50% of the sales tax, which is 1% that was going to the rainy day fund till it reaches 7 million. It's been at the maximum for quite a while, and we're diverting that to the general fund now. So, and you can just take all these questions, and maybe you can address them. I want to know where that money is being spent now. And then the second part is we're taking 0.5 cent, which is 25% of the sales tax, and we're diverting that now into the general fund. My concern is that if that's something that we're locked into, a la salaries or other recurring costs year after year, what happens in that year where we have that disaster, where we have to use that rainy day fund, but then our government's dependent on that to operate? How do you rebuild those reserves? And then when we want to pay off the additional debt, how do we do that? Because it's now dedicated to operating the government. And so in the past, when we diverted the 0.5 cent or the 1%, we diverted it to capital projects because that's something that we can control. We can just say, well, we won't do that this year because we need to build up our reserves. So I just want to be reassured that that money is not going to an annual cost that we can't ever recover, that we can't recover, say, next year if we need to.
I can explain this. It's not, there's nothing it's earmarked for if it's going to the general fund except operating. I mean, we don't have every single dollar earmarked for something. The reality is if the city is not self-reliant, in other words, paying for all of its operating expense, it has to take the subsidy from utilities. So.
Or you don't have to spend it.
Well, I mean, there's just certain things, everything's line itemed out in the budget. If there's something you don't want, then that's what you have to look at. But we had to have $6 million as a subsidy from the utilities. We're now, in this budget, at 1.2 million, which is a huge improvement. So whatever, we have to use every source of income that is a city income to pay for our operating, because if you don't, you're going to have to take more from utilities. It's really just that simple. This doesn't have to be a permanent thing, but you can look at it year to year, and we have 45 million, in excess of 45 million in our cash balances. We've had the 7 million rainy day fund for a long time, and even if you wanted to put a portion of that sales tax to capital, what it has been going to, it shouldn't exceed what's in the budget. And that's what's been happening, and just really, we're stockpiling cash for no reason. The capital, what was in the budget, if you know offhand?
What was in the budget?
Yeah,
Capital.
For all capital.
I guess my question is just the details of where that money is going, which is where I was at.
It's the operating. It just goes into
So it is
operating.
Well, if it's in operating, then it's going to need the same operational cost next year and the next year and the next year.
We need the same operating every year.
If I think I understand what the mayor's saying, and I think what it is, and you can correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, is that it's just, as opposed to continuing to take money out of utilities, transfer from utilities every year, we're using this money from the sales tax and operating to prevent us from having to go dip in utilities. But in the event there was a year where there was a disaster or we would have to leave that money in the rainy day, we could always transfer it back out of utilities. Is that right?
Yeah.
Could if we don't overcommit the utilities to paying for all the infrastructure
That-
improvements,
that's
which
true.
is a
That's
big
what we're
number.
trying to do.
So that money, I thought that the whole purpose of that was to, which I would also say is just a reclassification of expenses. There's not magically been that much money reduced in the budget. Our budget has grown, not been reduced. If you look at the overall utilities and general fund.
Combined expenses.
Combined expenses has increased, not decreased. There's just been a reclassification of a lot of expenses.
Could
The
you say that?
reclassification is comparing apples and apples. We've gone through the previous years to show what it would look like had we reclassified those same categories. We have improved. This is not, some sort of.
We've all acknowledged that the reclassification has not been a bad thing.
No, I'm saying that you can't say that we reclassified and now it shows that we're doing better because the reclassification, we're doing better because we have cut expenses, increased productivity. I mean, it all shows up in the
Not
bottom
cut
line.
expenses.
I think what Jack's saying is.
In
if
other
you take-
areas, yes.
If you take the line items, charges for services, there's a 221 utility reimbursement for revenue department and a 2.284 utility reimbursement for admin services. Whether you put them there or whether you put them down below as a transfer from the utility, is 6 in one, half dozen in the other. The classification, yes, it's cleaner and it looks better this way, but
We did
whether
that
you
for
do
the
it up-
previous
up
years
here or
too.
whether down there, it's still the.
But that reclassification has always been there. That's not a new thing that I started. That's how the budget was put in place. And we've taken that and done the same thing for previous years. The reclassification are all the operating expenses the utilities paid for the city that were not utility expenses. That's what we changed. And the income, I mean, that's what we've done is, and we've taken it from previous years so you can compare where we were and where we are today. The administration percentage, which can really be tweaked more at now that we have Munis and we have real expenses, that's been in place
Okay.
since before I took office. So this is not some magical, redistribution. I mean, we put this in a very transparent way. We are saving the difference between $6 million, which was $3 million in operating expenses that they paid and $3 million in transfers, to now there's no operating expenses that the utility is paying except for its share, which it's always paid. And we're now requiring $1.2 million in this budget for transfers. There's no magic here. This is true progress.
But the combined expenses of utilities and government are up, right?
I know it, but we've also had increase in revenue as well. And the savings that I'm talking about, for example, I put in the budget where we are not contracting out $500,000 a year in engineering expense. I mean, we can identify this in every line item where we've had savings. We might be increasing expenses in some places, but we have also saved a great deal in other.
Well, I guess back to my original comments was trying to find out, and you did say that this money is going to operating the government. I guess I still wanted to look that over a little bit because, if now we've started eating up those incomes to operate the government, they were put in, the sales tax was adopted for certain reasons, and we're just now robbing Peter to pay Paul. I don't know if it's.
I don't understand what you're saying. That makes no sense.
Well,
We're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. We know exactly where each dollar is going, and it's going to the proper departments with expenses and income.
Well, if you go back for the last, say, 6+ years, we paid off a lot of debt, so we were always
Debt that was utility debt, and income for the city shouldn't pay off utility debt, although there was some utility debt that was the city's debt. I'm not going to go and,
We paid off both, and it's all one It's all
It's not
the
one.
city's money.
It's not
There
one.
was
Otherwise,
20
you are taxing unfairly customers for utility.
We actually didn't raise rates any. That's been one of your
It doesn't
arguments.
matter. The rates that they are paying for city purposes. I mean, you have to separate that out. Otherwise, you risk going that way. It has to be separate.
We paid off $24 million worth of debt, so obviously we were operating in the black. We didn't borrow any money. We reduced debt by $24 million. So my point is that, lately, we've only been paying scheduled debt payments, nothing additional in utilities or in general government. And there are some things that we could have accelerated that payment on. And the reason we haven't been doing it is because we're robbing that sales tax that was supposed to be designated to pre-debt payment.
That sales tax went into the funds. There was no robbing of the sales tax. They went into the funds, which is why we have higher cash accounts. We're not paying off. It was scheduled to pay off city debt. City debt will be paid off with the additional $400-something thousand in 2019 and 2020. We didn't pay it off before because there was no debt to pay off early. There was no benefit to paying it off early. There's
could've-
debt in utilities. We're not going to use sales tax dollars to pay off debt in utilities.
No, and we never have.
Yes, we have.
That's incorrect.
That's, but I mean, that is true. We have.
What we did was we left the money, we let the sales tax operate the government, reduced our utility transfers so that we could pay off additional debt in the utilities.
That's not
we
true.
did.
Because if we had
It's-
$6 million,
It's absolutely true.
I have a graph that shows
Okay.
all of the money that was
I'm
paid
not
out of
gonna argue with you
utilities
anymore, Mayor. I'm
for
sorry. I'm not gonna
operating
argue.
expenses
I'm not
and.
gonna argue anymore. I'm not ready to pass the budget tonight, the final portion. Is anybody ready to pass it tonight?
I think I'm pretty much comfortable with it at this point.
You ready to use all that sales tax to go to operating?
Well,
Although we can't get a specific example. of what
Take
it's
that
going
out.
to.
I mean, there's no reason to hold up the whole budget just for that
whole budget.
ordinance. I'm talking about the city general fund.
The general
What's left?
fund has been largely adopted.
I'm saying, if you don't want to, if you have a problem with this one ordinance, pass
I'm
everything
not ready to
except the
change
ordinance.
sales tax ordinance. But you have
Then
to
take that
pass the
out, like I
sales tax-
said.
You have to pass the sales tax ordinance to balance the general fund accounts.
You would have to bump the transfer from utilities if you decided to put that ordinance in place and just stockpile the cash. Because there's nothing to put towards debt over and above what I put in there, and there's nothing to go for capital purchases and projects because we put that in there, the amount that we wanted sales tax to cover for that. So it's just going to go into the cash funds and require that same amount from utilities.
I guess my question would be, is there anything that's still in that general fund that is being budgeted for that we have questions or issues with?
And that was where, I still hadn't completely reviewed it yet.
Y'all have had since August 10th.
I mean, and I
I mean,
guess-
that's the
We got the
problem.
last version, October the 8th.
Yeah, and I guess, Jack, my point is, I understand what you're saying about where the money's coming from, and I don't disagree with you about being concerned about it being a recurring expense every year and where the money's coming from. But on the flip side of that, my position on it is I don't see anything in the general fund remaining that I think needs to be cut, or that I feel, I mean, maybe you bring something up that I would agree with. I just don't see anything myself. And so I guess my question is, in order to reduce that, move the money around, we've got to cut something, and I just don't see something.
Well, and I
to
was just
cut.
saying, I just hadn't fully reviewed it yet. That's where I was. I mean, maybe somebody can shed some light on it for me.
well, I think kind of to echo what Jay's saying, I mean, we may hit a point if we are taking, if we're spending funds that we're not stockpiling in that reserve, but right now the rainy day fund is fully funded, so if we're not using it to pay down debt, and we build up a reliance where now we've pumped that into the operating expenses,
Right.
and now
Something that was never intended to be
we've-
used for operating.
and we've added additional employees and payroll expense, et cetera, then you potentially faced with an issue where do you have to let go employees in order to balance the budget? But I think what you would do is just, you would cut back on the capital expense projects in the future. I mean, I think.
How do you explain that we've gone from $6 million, and I went back many, many, many years with the help of Jill, to now 1.2? We're not taking the sales tax money income for the general fund because we're doing worse. We're doing it in an effort to be completely self-sufficient. Then you can take that same amount of money, whatever money you want, 7%, of the profits, and spend that with community development. We're way better off than we were before. I mean, that's not part of this equation when we're discussing it. You're taking sales tax money. You can still divert some of it to something if you want, but just to do it because it's always been in place does not make sense anymore. You've got to look at where we are today and what's the best choice to use the city sales tax now.
And that 40.
And I think you gotta look at it every year.
If you look at 45
Every year.
million, I heard 40 a week ago, and it's now 45 million in
It's over
in
45.
savings. I mean, how much of that is restricted, though? I mean, it's easy to throw that.
I gave
number.
y'all the full report in the
I don't
budget.
think you have $45 million to
Is
spend.
it in here?
Yes.
Yeah, it's largely restricted. I'm just saying, if it goes to operational costs, if we did want to reduce the debt or eliminate the debt, we can't do it because it's
We're eliminating
going
the
to be
city
part
debt.
of a recurring expense.
We're eliminating the city debt by 2020.
But that's your plan. See, the plan prior was to eliminate it in 2019.
If you want to take more of the sales tax and pay it off in 2019, you can do that.
Which once going
But
back
we're
to
now
the-
down to the principal. There's not a huge benefit to do that. So that's why we divided it up into 2 years. So if you want to pay it off in 2019, you can do it with the
So,
sales tax.
In the past, when we took that sales tax and we put it in the general fund, we used money that wasn't being transferred from utilities to pay off utilities debt, and that's not being done this year. So let me ask you this question. Is there any utilities debt that can be retired this year early? You don't think so? Okay, I'm gonna look that up, okay? I'm gonna do-
You would have to do that with utility profits.
Exactly, which means you can keep more money in the general fund from the sales tax. In other words, you don't have to transfer it
Right.
to operate the government. You said that's not what we did, which is
That would be
exactly what
more
we
of a
did.
reason why you wouldn't want to transfer more money out of utilities to compensate for the sales tax you're still wanting to appropriate somewhere else.
Committee updates, Councilman Robinson?
I don't have any at this time.
Can I ask then, when are we going to put this on the agenda for?
If the council
Passing.
wants to amend the agenda and add it tonight, they're welcome to.
I mean, I think that you can, if you want to take the ordinance out, whatever the difference is, would just be transferred from utilities. But I don't know that there's a reason to hold it up
And I
anymore
said from the very
for that.
beginning, all
I
I want to
mean,
do is
it
look
doesn't
at
make
it a little more.
sense.
Y'all don't forget about gas tax, capital projects, and impact fee funds that haven't been passed.
There's things that need to be looked at.
But when?
I mean,
It's now, it'll be December soon. This was supposed to pass October
I
1st,
think it's on the agenda tonight to be passed.
but there's no resolution.
There's no resolution put together. Y'all can craft one if you want. Do you have any committee reports?
I don't.
I think this is
Councilman
more
Boone.
important than committee updates, is deciding what we're going to do with the budget.
Actually, the personnel board met, they're getting together to put together the pay scales and the framework for the pay rates for the employees to redo it. And we also put a big push on the safety issues that Fairhope's, actually I think it's getting a little better. But the gentleman's put together a safety plan, and I think it's worked very well. And when you can impress me, an old contractor that didn't pay attention to any of this stuff, it's pretty impressive. But Ron's done a very nice job with it. But anyway, that was pretty much the gist of the meeting.
Did they make a recommendation on the
No.
pay scales?
No, not yet. They're just doing a study on it right now.
Okay. Any others?
That's it.
Councilman Brown? Councilman
This
Conyers?
time.
Okay, Airport Authority met last week, and I think I may have mentioned we were working on crafting some language for the land leases on the east side, and it's still a draft. We have one resolution for the EIP oversight tonight, which is just some bookkeeping. We have to adopt procedures for the oversight of dispersing the funds in the AIP grant. Joe, I'm looking at you. Am I leaving anything out?
No, I mean, that's pretty, we'll have the notice of availability out, and then we'll just start, we started construction on the east side. We are moving in-house with bookkeeping.
We're gonna hire our own bookkeeper and hopefully take the burden off the treasurer of City of Fairhope. I think that was all I had. Department heads, Mr. Johnson?
Hope everybody had a happy Thanksgiving last week. I took the whole week off, so I don't have much to report. Just probably the biggest thing is we did get cleared on our professional service contract for the alley project with the transit hub, and hopefully we'll be able to get that through ALDOT for their approval and actually cut the designer loose and actually get started on it. I know we've talked about it for a whole long time, but everything else is going well in Public Works, and we'll give you a more thorough update in 2 weeks. How about that?
Question for you. I got a call from a citizen early this morning, and they said they had a lot of Thanksgiving garbage, and it won't all fit in the can. And, you know, we have the automated trucks that pick it up. What's someone to do when it won't all fit in the, and I know that, you know, there's different size cans, but we're talking about the once a year time when it won't all fit in there. What is the recommendation to the citizens?
We prefer they work really hard to get it in the can, but if it can't, if they
If you
will.
have 20 people over for Thanksgiving, you can't handle all your garbage.
If it is secured so that it doesn't blow around, the operator will get out after he empties the can, put that bag material in the can and rerun it so it gets emptied. But we, really try hard. If you get you a step ladder, you can get up and stomp it down real good. I recommend that. But yes, we have that happen after holidays. Is they'll just put the bag, the excess next to it. He'll get out of the truck and rerun the whole process. We understand that's just our guys hate coming back to work after Christmas and Thanksgiving because a lot of folks had company and will have more than they can handle.
And,
So.
and I just needed to give the citizens some answer. I understand the situation that Public Works in as well, and they have a lot to pick up, but this gentleman makes a good point also, is that if he takes all his garbage to the curb and it's not picked up, does he put all the garbage that's full of, expiring food back in the garage? Because you can't leave it, you don't want to leave it on the curb and let some stray dog, throw it all over the place.
Well, on their assigned pickup day, if they get it out there, we'll get it picked up.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But it needs to be bagged up in some.
Yes, just for wind and that kind of thing, so.
Yeah, okay. All right, great. Lynn, did you have anything? Okay. Gas? Water? You got an update on the water tower? Don't make a liar out of me now. I told them they were still on schedule for the 18th December.
Yes. I talked to Carl Nelson today. He felt like if we didn't get any real bad weather. Now, if we get a bunch of freezing rain or anything like that, and it stays below 50 degrees, he's sending extra painters to try to make up for cold mornings, and they'll have more painting going on. If you've noticed, all the blasting is done. That equipment's being moved off now. The only noise that should be out there are compressors, and that'll be done fairly quickly. I did talk to him about candy striping it. He said that was standard operating procedure, and he would even work with the contractors because he works with them in other areas to try to come out as early as possible and get the cell phone towers back up.
Yeah.
All right.
Can the painters work, if they candy stripe those areas where the antennas go, can they come back out and paint around those areas while the antennas are up?
Yeah, he said that they work together with these guys all the time. He said it won't stop, it won't affect him any way, shape, or form.
But in any event, they should be completely done by the 18th.
I told him, don't tell me on December 18th. You're not going to make it on December or 17th. They're not going to make it on the 18th. But he said he felt, unless we get some really bad weather, he felt like the December 18th was doable.
Okay.
All right. Do you remember last week when I mentioned we had a failure of the well 7? That bill's going to come in about 10,000 over, roughly. So we're going to have to do something about that. There's not a lot we can do about it. I think I reminded everybody, we have capped the well. The debris has been grouted in, and we're not going to get a loss of any production from that well. But now we have to put it back together.
Right.
So.
Okay. So the cleaning out of that debris is going to.
Right, it came in about 8,100, and the fact that we couldn't use some of the old column pipe that we're having to replace it because it was all damaged is added expense. Some of the stuff we thought we would be able to reuse, it's not possible. So I'll have that for you on next council. I just want to give you a heads up. I didn't want to shock you with that.
Right.
All right?
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, you got anything? Mr. Peterson, you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Electric department?
The agenda item.
All right. What do you got back there? Eric, anything in the building department? Where's Wayne? Where is he? Buford, anything from the planning department? Any updates?
Council President, Mr. Dice is right outside. I can fetch him for you.
Okay.
Throw him under the bus.
Do you have any updates from the planning department?
No, sir, we don't. We're just moving along with applications. We got a meeting, planning commission meeting Monday night, but other than that, we're moving along. We've already talked about the small cell and the Greeno Road corridor, so but other than that, we're doing good.
Okay, thank you. Did I leave anybody out? Sherry Lee? Oh, I can't see it, okay.
No chief back there. I was actually just talking to her about the geese. Apparently there was a goose slaughter down at the duck pond. And I sent the photos over to J.J. McCool, who told me he feels pretty confident that it was a fox. So he looked at the photos. I guess he knows what the carnage looks like from a fox-eaten goose.
How many did you get?
It looks like just one, honestly, and the geese are back now. Chief was just telling me someone went down, but there was an article that came out, I think, in the time since we've been here. So I just want to make sure we said something about it. Just, I think people were concerned, was it kids out there, or like what happened to the goose? But natural predators, which is common this time of year. Events, I mean, we just have we're nonstop action in our department from Veterans Day through Mardi Gras. You know how that is. And then we've got some stuff on the agenda tonight we can talk about during the agenda meeting.
Okay.
But I just wanted to mention that about the goose for concerned citizens.
Okay, great. Chief Hollingshead? Chief Ellis? Okay. Jeff, did you have something?
Just noticed we had a few minutes to spare. I'm currently working with utilities and police department right now to look at a new solution to replace our radios. We've been using our current provider for about 6-7 years now, and starting to have a lot of issues with that service. A lot of coverage issues. Right now, I think the service has been down for about 2 days. So utilities have no radios at this point. The last hurricane that came through, it hit Panama City right before it hit. Their service went down. We had no weather in the area, so we're just kind of having little issues with them that are proven to be hard for utilities because they've got to be able to communicate. And the reason why I'm coming to you, this was not really planned by me before I did my budget. Looking at the numbers with the contract, we're actually going to save money by going to this other company. The only problem is we're going to have to purchase new devices, which may put me over budget just a little bit. The devices are around $175 per unit. But they said they'll give us a $100 credit. I think after 2 months, they'll give us a $100 credit per device after we establish service with
You
them.
say you're making a recommendation that we change providers?
Yeah,
or
it's kinda give you a
you said
heads
that
up
kinda
that-
matter-of-factly, like,
Yeah.
we're changing, and
I think we need to. I think it's time. We need to have a provider that that's more reliable, that has better coverage.
now, does this affect the police department as well?
The police department uses the current provider as a backup.
As a backup, okay.
Right.
Because, we bought a lot of radios for them, and I know a few years ago, we said, now what happens if we change service providers in a few years? And I think the answer was, we won't change soon. And I didn't, we said, is the equipment going to be obsolete? We'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on radios.
Actually, I would love to be able to get that equipment into the hands of the utilities, but, it's just cost prohibitive right now. So this is just relying on a third-party cell phone provider to provide a service.
And how did the hurricane affect our service here?
I have no idea. They lost the cell phone tower site lost communication back to their main, I guess, their main facility, and they had to rush out and put together a wireless solution for a backhaul. And I'm not sure what the issue is right now, but I think like 70% of their coverage area is down. I haven't gotten an update from them lately, so I'm assuming it's still down. But
And is this the first problem we've had with them?
it's probably the third time it's been down in the past 2 years. But it's really the coverage area. I mean, the coverage problem where they work in areas where the current provider just doesn't provide good service.
Okay, and this is not the same provider that provides it for all of the county emergency responders, then? This is not the same network that we're talking about then?
I mean, I believe the one that we're looking at moving to, I think Riviera uses them, so I mean, they're...
Okay, there was one that we said we're actually paying for part of the antenna that's the
Oh, no,
sheriff's
no,
department. That's a totally different.
That's a totally different system. That's the police radios, and fire uses them as well as their primary communication device. Yeah, we're not doing anything with that. That works
You wanna
great.
mention who this is that we're having problems with?
Yeah. We'll wait till we get to that. Hopefully, I'll get this on the next agenda. I mean, if it's something that
Well, you're
the
asking
numbers
us to
will-
consider changing providers, but you're not telling us who the current provider
Well,
is.
current provider is Southern Link
Okay.
Wireless, and we're looking to move to Verizon Wireless.
Okay. And I think they have the push to talk. Is that right?
That's right. Verizon has push to talk. It works
I was
just.
gonna say,
just
I thought they all liked the push to talk.
Yeah, it has a physical button on the side, and it has actually an added benefit to their current devices. They'll have cameras, so if they're out at site and need to take a picture of an incident or some type of damaged equipment, they have a camera there ready, available. I think all around this will be a good move. The devices we got several. The police departments tested demoed devices as well as utilities, and they all just came back with great feedback. So I'm just kind of doing this for them, trying to provide better service.
I think you ought to put together a proposal and let us look at it, though. And maybe that's a work session item for the next meeting.
Okay.
As opposed to a resolution to change a whole provider and tell us today, because we had a few minutes, and then want us to change it in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was just trying to find the direction I need to go from,
I think we ought to see some kind of cost comparison,
Absolutely.
what it's going to cost us to change.
Okay. We can do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other department heads? Okay. All right, let's move into the agenda meeting then. So, getting back to the budget now, if somebody would like to add a resolution to pass the remaining parts of the budget, can make that motion at the beginning of the meeting. you know, to the mayor's concerns, you could or could not adopt the sales tax ordinance, which would divert the money that's supposed to go into a fund for prepayment of debt and to be used for operating expenses or for other uses. You might want to talk about that. I don't know what those other uses would be right now, but you're at the liberty to do that. So I'll ask you again when we get up there if anybody wants to do that.
I think that what is in the budget now is
400 and something thousand additional going to city debt for 2019 and 2020 to pay it in full. If you want to pay it in 2019, then you can put 800 and something thousand. There's no real benefit to do that. And then the capital purchase, the capital purchases is also in the budget. I just said don't keep more than what the capital purchases are. So it's.
Let me ask you this, Mayor. If you look forward to 2019, 2020, do you have enough capital expenditures in this budget so that if you had to pull back in 2019 and 2020 so that sales tax revenue could be used? I mean, we can't predict what's going to happen, but let's say that we did need to replenish our reserves or divert the money for some other use. I kind of just would like a gentleman's agreement that it would be used for what it's intended to be used for once again, and that's what I said my concern was in the beginning, that it doesn't go to recurring costs so that we can never recover it again.
Well, what if we amended that sales tax ordinance to increase, to reallocate that money from debt prepayment to go to reserves and increase the reserves from 7 million to 10 million or 8 million or 9 million, and then anything above and beyond that, once we hit that point, could roll into the general fund, because there isn't an added benefit to really paying off, you know, the extra 400,000 or 1 year early.
No, and really you wouldn't do it there, but you might want to look at we need to look at our URW as close as well to see which one of those might be at a 4, 5, or 6% interest rate that.
Well, I know last year that we paid off, I think, either last year or the year before, the only thing that was even out there for prepayment, it seemed like we paid it off.
Yeah, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but yeah, I don't disagree with that.
And it doesn't
If you're
make
going to
sense
do that, though, you're going to have the utility transfer.
Right.
So that, I mean.
So it sort of defeats the purpose of doing that,
It's
too.
really, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. We're not paying, whatever you're funding the general fund to pay for operating, the sooner we get the city self-sufficient, you're not going to take sales tax back and say, okay, what do we want to do with that? You're going to take a percentage of the utility profit and use it in a way that we've never done so before, and that's in community development. And you can determine what percentage you want to look at other utilities to see what the percentage is that goes back to municipality, whatever that looks like.
I would only argue this, that the city is extremely lucky to have profitable utilities, and for a long time, those utilities were used to improve the quality of life in Fairhope. And I don't think the citizens had a real big problem with that.
I mean,
So-
paying the phone bill and paying operating expenses, I guess,
Well,
is,
you can put
part of
those
that.
back
but-
in utilities where they belong, and I applaud you for doing that. But once again, that's just reallocating expenses from general funds and taking those proportions of staff that are being used for utilities and putting that expense in utilities instead of taking out of the general fund. Nobody disagrees with that.
I need to do a better job to explain where we were and where we are today. It's not, we're not taking the administrative cost that utilities has paid. We have not touched that. All we have done is reallocated city expenses to city expenses and revenue, you know, and we're also have reduced the transfer. So instead of the city relying $6 million, approximately $6 million from utilities, we are now relying for 2019 1.2 million. Now, these are apples, we're comparing apples to apples as the previous years, you know, when we're comparing.
I guess I'm looking at it in a much simpler way than I think than either of the two of you are looking at it is I don't think it makes a difference where the money comes from. It's either coming from the sales tax or it's coming from utilities, but it's gonna come from somewhere. My point in looking at it is there anything in there that I think needs to go or that I think is unnecessary? And in my view of this remaining piece, I don't see that. But whether it comes from utilities or whether it comes from sales tax, it doesn't really matter because you can always move that
One or the other.
Well,
make it change.
and I'll disagree with that, but to my point was I just hadn't reviewed it fully to understand whether we were inflating the government to a point we can't recover from.
And I understand that as a concern.
I don't
I'm
know
not-
that there's a
I'm not fighting that.
municipality that has not passed a budget yet, no. I mean, how long does it take to
Mayor,
make a
please
decision?
don't make a big deal out of maybe 5% of the budget that hasn't been passed.
This is the general, until this passes, we can't move forward on everything, though. If that's the only problem you have, to me, we spend time discussing that. And if you want to, I don't care at this point. I just want the budget passed. Change the ordinance how you see and where you're going to be comfortable doing it, but let's pass the budget.
It wasn't so much that as I was not satisfied with, I had reviewed the expenditures in the detail that I wanted to review them, because I'm concerned that we're growing our government so fast that we can't recover. We're going to move on now.
Are there any questions that you have, Councilman Brown and Councilman Boone?
At this point.
I don't know.
I mean, are you ready to pass it?
I am. I feel like I haven't found any problems with I think, obviously, if there is a problem we find later on in the general government that we need to work on, you can work on it then because it's a working
You still
paper.
have to get everything
And
approved.
I haven't found any myself, so.
I've had to fully review the personnel sheet that was emailed, a couple weeks ago.
This is just for everything else is passed.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
I don't think there was much in the general fund for personnel. It was all the other departments that have already passed. So,
I have one last question about this, because we've got the list of city bank accounts it's from July 31st, so I don't know how things may have been amended and adjusted since then, but at that time, we had a little bit over $1 million in the account for sales tax, debt prepayment. Do you know if that's still roughly that dollar
I don't know
amount?
if Jill's still here. I don't know if you can pull that up from here.
Because, that would basically be the remaining 800,000 is already sitting in a bank account if I'm reading
Oh, I know.
that correctly.
We already I already said that I put that extra money in here to pay off what is left. We already have it in cash accounts to do it.
Okay, that's what.
I mean, because
so
y'all,
it's sitting in
I think
there.
2 million was set aside last term, and it was just put into a fund. So,
We got a few minutes. We're going to go through the agenda. Wayne will discuss items 5 and 6, and there'll be a public hearing for those. Item 7, I don't think doesn't need any discussion. Item 8, we talked about at length, and I think what we come up with for item 8 was discussed in the last work session. Item 9 is just bookkeeping for the grant oversight, and Joe McInerney's here if you have questions about that. If we have questions about item 10, would that be you, Richard Johnson? Item 11, would that be you as well? Okay. Item 12, that'd be you as well. Item 13. Terry? Richard? Okay, item 14, we discussed that at length. Item 15, is that Mr. Peterson? Oh, that's you, Jay? Okay, I'm pretty sure I know what that is, but, and then items 16 through, let's see. Aren't those just budgeted items, though? Yeah, I think those are already budgeted items that were just, money was already been appropriated on through item 22. Who's going to discuss the library envelope repairs?
Mr. Peterson.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on item 27? We brought that up, and this was put on the agenda, the appropriation of $6,000 for that, pay for those concerts. Item 28 we just discussed. Item 29. We talked about it last meeting's work session. That's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and adjourn, and I'll start back in about 5 minutes.